Hello and good evening. Welcome to Salisbury Pride's virtual event this evening. Our topic for tonight is how LGBTQ plus couples make their families, how people build their families. So we thank you for joining us. This event is sponsored by Food Lion, and I am your host tonight, and I'm Catherine Lamb. And just a little background on me. I am on the Salisbury Pride board, and I am a clinical social worker at the VA hospital in Salisbury. But this is in no way related to my employment with the VA. But I am glad to be part of this conversation tonight. So I will let our panelists introduce themselves, whoever would like to start.
I think Sean said no, so we'll go. I'm Becky. This is Caitlin. I'm also on the board of Salisbury Pride. We live in China Grove with our adorable little 4-year-old hot mess. And Caitlin is also in the mental health field.
I work as an IDD care coordination supervisor.
And I work in marketing for NC State University.
Thank you. Whoever wants to go next. Sean, you want to?
Okay, I'll go. I'm Sean, and this is Eric Edmond. We live in Mooresville with our 3 children, ages 4, 5, and 6. And I work for Novant Health in Salisbury.
And I am a retail manager for Williams-Sonoma.
Thanks, Connie.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Connie Vetter. I'm an attorney in Charlotte and all of North Carolina, and I represent people in family formation, adoption, and surrogacy, and then also wills and other estate documents and a few other matters. And I'm happy to be here tonight. Looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you all for being part of this panel tonight. So if y'all don't mind, just to get us started a little bit, give us a little background on the process that y'all went through in order to start building your families, just so our audience has a bit of an idea of kind of where we're coming from and what we're talking about tonight. And then Connie, if you don't mind kind of jumping in with what your role is sort of in all of this that we're talking about. So Becky and Caitlin, I'll go back to you if you don't mind getting the ball rolling. Kind of how did this all get started, and what's the process that you kind of went through for this to create little Maggie?
So I always knew that I wanted to have at least one child and that I wanted to carry a child. So, when I met Becky, that was like one of my hey, you just need to know up front, I want kids. So, once we got married, we decided to kind of look into what were our options, talk to, my doctors about what we needed to do. So we did go to see a reproductive endocrinologist and talk about the options, talk about the things we needed to do to get prepared to do that. And we ultimately decided to go with a sperm donor from a sperm bank. We chose to go with an unknown donor. We could have chosen to go with a known donor, but we did not. So the process for reserving sperm is it's an interesting process. You actually go to a website and look through profiles of the sperm donors and what they do, what their physical characteristics are. We actually heard an interview with him, so we could hear his audio, and we ultimately our goal was to find a sperm donor that was as much like Becky as possible. So kind of similar jobs and kind of similar backgrounds, that kind of thing. And so once we selected it, you just pay for it and they send it to your doctor, and then you go from there with the process medically. And we tried for a while before we got pregnant, but ultimately I carried Maggie, and that was about 4.5 years ago.
Awesome. Oh, and I should say to our audience that if you have questions at any time, we welcome questions. So if you have burning questions about anything that comes up tonight, feel free to put them in the chat and we will talk about them as we go. So feel free to ask your questions. Becky, you have anything to add to the process?
It was just a very weird experience. And especially looking back, like we've been very open. If people have questions, we don't mind sharing kind of the process that we went through and how long it took us to get pregnant and things like that. So the more you talk about it, the more you kind of realize how surreal it was at the time. The whole process of, clicking through a website to pick a donor was just bizarre. So it's a very, it can be for us. It was a pretty lengthy journey to get to where we are now.
And an expensive one.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we'll talk about the expense in a little bit, if that's okay. Sean and Eric, would y'all like to jump in and kind of tell us? Y'all have had a completely different journey.
Yes.
During this whole thing, y'all didn't really need the sperm donation, right? So tell us a little bit about how this worked for y'all versus Caitlin and Becky.
Yeah, well, we were lacking a uterus, so and you just can't order those online, so we weren't able to do that.
We Google searched it; it's not there.
So our journey was very different. We went through DSS and as foster parents and fostered these 3 little ones for 3.5 years before our adoption was finalized. Going through DSS is quite a process. You have to go through what's called MAP classes ahead of time, and then you're licensed. And then they call you one day and say, hey, we have a kid. Can they come to your house? And so that's pretty much what happened. We went through all the classes, and at 9 a.m., we were called to say, hey, congratulations, you are now a licensed foster parent. And at 3 p.m., we had these kids at our house. So it was that quick. There was a lot of court involved. We followed the birth parents' cases through the court system. Our kids did not have a good start to life. So we did follow the parents through their whole court process. And then once that was done, we were able to finally adopt them.
And I think following the parents through the court process also helped us to know, what the children had been through and where we were coming from and what we might face in the future, what memories might come up, what, traumas or triggers might be there to help with that in parenting realm. So.
Great. Thanks. So Connie, what got you into this line of work, and what do you do kind of in this process that these fine folk have been going through?
Well, it's part of my practice. My practice is not solely focused on LGBTQIA clients, but certainly that's a large part of my practice. And before we had marriage equality, I was working with clients who were forming families even without marriage equality, and individuals adopting, couples adopting, and working with whether people were adopting through Department of Social Services or privately or internationally, or also doing surrogacy or dealing with sperm donors. With sperm donors, you mentioned you used a cryobank. There's also people will use a known donor, and we can talk more about that later if you want. But I try to cover a little bit of a lot of the gamuts. I just had a couple in my office today who are very beginning of the journey and had a lot of questions about, what does it mean and how do we do this and what does it cost? So I try to give people a roadmap there's a lot of different options.
So I think we have a question from the audience. How did your families react when you decided to have a baby? So what did your families think of all this when y'all decided to move forward, or when you told them you were going to move forward?
I don't think it was a huge shock for my family, because I've just always like really loved kids and being around kids. But I mean, they were. I think they were. I don't. They probably had a lot of questions they didn't ask, to be honest. But I mean, they were pretty supportive. Like they followed our journey through, all of the different doctor's appointments and that kind of thing to try to get pregnant. So they were pretty supportive. I don't really.
My parents were over the moon, I think, to find out that there was a possibility of more grandkids. I think for a lot of parents, when they find out that their child is gay, I think that's one thing that comes up is well, am I gonna have grandkids? And so, my parents already had 2 adorable granddaughters. My sister has 2 kids. So I think it may have been a little bit of a surprise because I was never really that vocal about wanting children or anything like that. So it was probably a little bit of a surprise, but they couldn't have been happier to find out that there were going to be potential new grandchildren in the family.
So ours, my parents are very conservative, so that didn't go well. But the majority of our family is very supportive. They love these kids just like we birthed them ourselves. It's just like they've always been here.
And I will say my mom was very, very angry, not at me, at what these children had been through. So I think that gave her even a softer spot for them because of knowing that and knowing that they didn't deserve that.
Connie, what do you see? Do most people's families, are they accepting of this process, or can you speak to that from your work?
Yeah, I actually have had clients whose families were not accepting of their relationship until the grandkids showed up. And then they really made some progress on their acceptance of their child and of their child's relationship. So it's been really good. Yeah.
Great. So I think we have another question from the audience. Do you have to foster first using DSS, or were you able to go straight to adopt?
You have to foster first. Not technically, because you can decline when they call for a placement, you can decline it. Some placements they'll call and let you know that it's a free and clear, meaning the parents have relinquished their rights or they've been terminated. And that kind of goes straight to adoption, but most families have to foster first.
Interesting.
And I will say that fostering, it kind of has a really negative stigma, but it is absolutely one of the best processes. It makes such a huge difference in the lives of the children and in your life. I mean, it completely changed my entire outlook. I lost a little hair in the process. So.
Great. So we have another question. This question is for Connie. Since marriage equality has the path for LGBTQ plus to adopt, has it become easier? And have the forms adjusted to say parent versus mother and father? And Sean is shaking his head no. Caitlin.
Well, I don't know that so there's different kinds of adoptions. So there's adoptions through foster care, through the Department of Social Services or Children's Home Society or Lutheran Family Services or anything like that. But there's also adoption that you can do through an agency. There's also adoption that you can do through privately connecting with the birth parents. And then also people can adopt internationally. So just know that each of those is distinct and different. And so has it gotten easier? It depends. It depends on what kind of adoption you're doing. I certainly have had clients who have connected privately with birth parents even before marriage equality. and were chosen as the adoptive parent by the birth parents who had several to choose from. But as between the adult relationship, between the parental relationship, it is easier because both people are adopting. And so they're both already on full legal parents when the adoption is granted as a full adoption. Other things kind of vary from county to county. Mecklenburg County does things differently than Iredell or Rowan or whatever. They all have the same law that they follow, but they get to do things slightly differently if they want to. And so it's sometimes you have to adopt in the county where you live or where the child is, but there can be some differences from county to county about that. So there may very well be that things we talk about tonight that I have to tell you this how this county does it, but not that county. But I would say that it has gotten easier on the adult side. Whether marriage equality automatically wiped out prejudice, I think we can all say no, it did not. And so you all probably have faced some of that.
Yeah. So how long does this whole process take from the beginning where you thought, all right, we're ready to do this. We're ready to have us some children to brighten up the home, to the time of actually having some babies in the home? How long does this take?
So for us, we went to our first endocrinologist appointment in February of 2015, and Maggie was born in December of 2016. So, almost 2 years. But I mean, again, I knew before that I wanted to have kids, and I had seen an endocrinologist previously. So we had a few steps knocked out, even at that point.
Also, she was born early, so she wasn't due until March. So it would have been right at 2 years. Right at 2 years for us. But that's how many cycles was that? 5?
5 cycles.
5 cycles of insemination before we got pregnant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ours, like I said, once we got our license, we had children that afternoon. The classes, I think, were 6 weeks beforehand. And then we fostered them for 3.5 years. So for those 3.5 years, they could have been taken back any day.
They'd had a fight on their hands, but they could.
Connie, how long do you see that this typically takes? Do you have an idea? I'm sure
it varies because there's so many different ways to form a family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how much does this whole process cost? If you're willing to say, how much does this whole process cost, folks?
I mean, so from my perspective, it just varies. It depends on your medical issues. It depends on your medical history, how much that's going to cost.
Also your insurance.
It depends on your insurance. I happen to have pretty good, decent health insurance that covered some things, but it certainly didn't cover all of it. I have absolutely no idea how much we spent out of pocket up to the point when we got pregnant, but it was probably close to $10,000.
Working with DSS is very different. They actually provide you with financial assistance. So you get a monthly stipend per child, depending on their age. Children under 5 get WIC, and they also have Medicaid. So everything's covered. The only thing that we paid for was the attorney fees when we adopted them, but then DSS reimbursed us. So it's a process, but it's worth the wait financially because you're not spending all that money.
Yeah, there's absolutely no way we would have been able to financially do it 3 times. I think 1 would have been a stretch for us, but 3 would have not been an option at all.
And there is an adoption tax credit that you can get as well.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So, Connie, how much do you see people spend on building their families?
Again, it depends on what route they take. And so it just varies widely. As you can imagine, international adoption is much more expensive than adopting through foster care. If you're, there's IVF, I can't give you a good answer. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's going to cost more than a backseat of a Chevy. Let's put it that way.
And take more time than that too.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. There's some of that straight privilege, right? And straight people don't realize how easy they have it sometimes, right? All right. So we have some more comments or questions from the audience. How were both couples treated by the reproductive and hospital professionals and the DSS and court system? Was it a welcoming experience?
That's a good question. So we were actually the first same-sex couple in Iredell County to become foster parents. So there were a lot of questions and during the classes, how do we handle this? What do we say? But they did a great job. They've always been supportive, 100%. We've never had any issues at all with anyone from the Department of Social Services or the court system. It's actually been a good experience, I think, overall.
So for us, like at the endocrinologist, I will say that they had dealt with other lesbian couples before us. They dealt with surrogacy for gay parents, different things. So they were very open. They were very welcoming. They were great. They were fantastic. We never felt uncomfortable in any way there, other than when you get a sperm donation from a cryobank, which we did before. They can accept it, and I don't know if this is their policy or this is a broader policy, but before they will accept it into their facility, because they store it there, they require that you go through a psychological evaluation. So we had to go see a psychologist, and it wasn't a bad experience, I would say, but it wasn't comfortable and it wasn't welcoming. And like, the thing that stands out to me was one of the questions that was asked was, well, when did you know you were gay? What does that have to do with my ability to parent a child? Absolutely nothing. Did you ask the straight people that were getting a sperm donation from a cryobank when they knew they were straight? Probably not, so that part was frustrating and off-putting, and it definitely stands out as like kind of a sour memory. But in general, the hospital professionals and that kind of thing. Well, the endocrinologists were great. And the hospital, generally speaking, was great. But there were, when I was in the hospital as a mother, and when we were in and out of the NICU because she was born very early. We were in and out of the NICU for 2 months. And so most people, like honestly, like probably 95% of the people that we encountered were absolutely fantastic. But every once in a while, we would get like a professional or somebody that was coming in that wouldn't know exactly how to address us, or would say, "Who's the mom?"
We both are.
We are.
We both are.
So there were a lot of things like that, and for the most part, it was fine. But anytime as a gay family, you're going to encounter those things over time. Hopefully, most of the time, it's great and people are welcoming, and people maybe are curious, but they're fine with everything, and they'll talk to you and ask questions. But you do run into people that it just makes things a little awkward.
Well, and I think for some of the staff that we encountered at the hospital, because we were there for so long, we went through, we met a lot of different specialists and doctors and nurses along the way, and I think for some of them, we may have been the first same-sex parents that they had dealt with. So some of it, I think, was just ignorance. It was just, I don't know what to call you. I don't know how to refer to you as moms, parents, things like that. And there were probably some forms that we had to fill out where we had to mark through the line that said father and put, mother or whatever. But down to the lady that came in that night and filled out the paperwork for Maggie's birth certificate, like she didn't bat an eye at putting both names on the birth certificate documents. So overall, it was a very positive experience. And I like to think for the people that maybe we were the first gay parents that they'd encountered, that maybe they learned something. Maybe they came out of it with a little bit more knowledge and understanding. So maybe the next time they encounter gay parents, maybe it won't be quite so awkward for them either.
I will say, we get the question, which one of you is the mom? We get asked that. And I did want to say, I pulled out our adoption decrees, and the state has changed the forms. They do say parent 1 and parent 2. But if you go to register your children for kindergarten, like we just did, they say mother and father.
So what do you say to folks who say, who's the mom? How do you handle that?
I laugh and say the one that's sitting in a jail cell. And I just explained that our children have 2 fathers. And that's the end of the discussion.
So what do you say? And we have some questions from the audience coming up as well. But what do you say to your children? Do you explain that to your children, or how does it come up with your children?
So we have always just explained to them that there are all kinds of different families. Some kids have a mom and dad. Some have 2 moms. Some have 2 dads. Some live with their grandparents. Some live with their aunts and uncles. So we've always said that families are different, and we try to show them those differences when we're out and about, and we see things that are different than our family. We want them to know the differences, but we also want them to know that it's okay to have 2 dads and that they're not the only one.
We're very fortunate to have friends that are same-sex couples, that the kids are around, so they see it, and it's nothing unusual for them, I don't think so.
Catherine, may I speak to the question about the forms?
Sure.
Real quick. I don't know what y'all's birth certificates say, but I'll tell you that the state has had a little bit of a struggle, in my opinion, about getting the birth certificate form updated. The one that is supposed to be used is the one that says parent/mother, parent/father. I'll tell you that, as best as I can tell, the one that you actually get is whichever one is in the printer of the person who is actually processing the birth certificate. Because, I mean, not surprisingly, a lot of people don't notice anything. Same-sex couples are going to notice the birth certificate. Different sex couples are not going to notice the birth certificate. So the state doesn't have a huge interest in throwing out all of those old forms. What I've seen happen, though, is if you get one that says mother and father, which is the old form, you can go back to the Register of Deeds and say you need to give my family the correct form. So that is a possibility. But don't be surprised. I mean, I try to warn people that there's a chance you will get a mother-father form. I don't think that feels very good, but I think I understand why they do it, and it is fixable.
How do you find the court system? How welcoming is the court system overall?
In my experience with my clients, it's been phenomenal. In tons of counties, not just here where we're talking, in tons of counties. There are incompetent people and bigoted people everywhere, but I will tell you that in my experience, to the much greater extent, there are people who are very happy to show you how open-minded they are. I mean, there's a decent chance you're going to get a story about their mother, father, sister, brother, niece, or nephew, right? I see shaking heads. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Becky and Caitlin, I didn't want to leave y'all out of the question about what do y'all say to Maggie about having 2 moms?
So we read a lot of books. Like we teach through like her bedtime stories a lot. Like if we know she's got a dentist appointment coming up, we're reading dentist books. So I mean, she definitely has a wide variety of books about different kinds of families, people with two moms, people with two dads, that kind of thing. So we've read those to her since she was, I mean, didn't even understand. We've always read books to her. So, but now, I mean, it's really funny. Like she's 4. She's precocious and she's very talkative. So like we were at the zoo a few weeks ago and like we're sitting there like waiting to eat lunch and she like sees this table of kids like across the way and she's like, "Hi, I'm Maggie and I'm 4 years old and my favorite color is purple and I have 2 moms." So she has no problem telling people that. Now I will say like that's just started in the past like year or so and she did not go to preschool this year. So I do wonder like next year she's going to preschool and I wonder how that will be. I venture to say she may be the only kid at that preschool that has same-sex parents. So you know it'll be interesting to see like how her reaction is. I mean, she also recognizes like, oh, my cousins have a mom and a dad. Like she gets that it's like different, but she doesn't care right now. So it'll be interesting to see how like what happens once she like and how other kids react to it as well.
So we kind of had our first experience with someone, excuse me, a couple weeks ago. I was at the gas station and had the windows down and the kids were yelling at this man at another pump. And he came over to talk to them and he asked what their names were. And one of the boys goes through the whole list of everybody in the family and he said, Eric. And the man said, "Oh, is Eric your other brother?" And he went, "No, he's our other parent." Just like it was normal. Why didn't you know that?
It's cute. All right, we have a couple questions from the audience. I'm going back to, I think this was about Caitlin. No, we're not going to do that. Okay, well, we can go there. Did it take multiple sperm donations? I think Caitlin may have answered that, but will you speak on that again?
So we just had one donor that we selected, but I mean, because it took multiple tries for us to get pregnant, at some point we did have to like order more sperm, which is part of the like weird, like crazy process of getting pregnant that way. But like at some point we did have to order more sperm, but we had already selected that sperm donor and just, you know, ordered another lot of you know, to be delivered to our endocrinologist.
So our endocrinologists, the way they work is for you to do one cycle of insemination, you have to have 2 vials of sperm at their office so that if they prepare one for your insemination and when they thaw it out, if they, you know, they run tests on it and everything, if there's something wrong, then they want to have a backup that they can test and try to use that one. Because during that cycle, you've gone through all the medications and injections and things like that. And so
you don't want to get to insemination day when they thaw the sperm and like there'd be a problem.
And you only have one.
You would have wasted all the money that you put into that cycle.
Right. And all of the, you know, the injections and the hormones and all that stuff. So they require that you have 2 to even do a cycle. So I think the first time we bought like 4 because we expected that it would take more than one cycle. And then we ended up having to go back and buy some more.
So this is my question, not from the audience. Why did y'all decide to go with a sperm bank instead of like a family? Because I know some people will have like a family member donate. Why did y'all decide to go that route? Or Sean, you could ask Sean to donate. I mean, so
that's an awkward conversation to have. So I mean, honestly, that's part of it. And like, just, I mean, not really having anybody that we knew of that we felt would be comfortable doing it. You know, we felt like that was just probably like the best and easiest route for us to take. But I mean, yeah, like lots of people do it other ways and that's totally fine. That was just kind of what we chose to do.
Legally, it's legally safer to go through a cryobank because they're going to not only do all the screenings and everything, but he signs off on paperwork saying he wants no parental rights or responsibilities. And he is anonymous to the family. And so it keeps, I I think people tend to, and you all can speak to this, but I think people feel more comfortable knowing that this random individual is not going to show up at your front door at some point. People like using a known sperm provider because they know the individual. If they can get through the conversation, they know the person, they know his personality and all that sort of thing. But legally, it's a little bit more difficult because his rights have not been terminated. And unless you do terminate his rights, a child in North Carolina is a minor until they're 18. And 18 years is a really long time for everybody to remember to go by what they agreed to all those years ago. And I will say there are tons and tons of these that go through beautifully, and everybody does exactly what they agreed to do. As an attorney, not surprisingly, we only hear about the things that went really, really poorly. And when things go wrong, they go really wrong. Like donor decides, I want to be a dad and I'm going to fight you for custody, really bad things like that. So there's pros and cons of both ways.
Thanks. So we have some questions about company policies that support adoption and IV. Can y'all speak to that as employees of places? How was that?
So for me, Novant Health has been amazing. They do have paternity leave for all new parents, whether you adopt or have a live birth child. And they do offer some adoption assistance.
So the company that I worked for, I kind of spoke to this earlier, like our health insurance was good for as far as coverage. I mean, even it wasn't great. If we had to go to the next step, which is in vitro fertilization, which is much more expensive, nothing would have been covered. That would have all but come straight out of our pocket. And a lot of it still did come out of our pocket because they only covered certain parts of the insemination process. But despite that, we felt very fortunate that I did have coverage in that way. I mean, I also had supportive boss, whatever. They knew that I was going through that process. Like they allowed me to like flex my time when I needed to like run back and forth to the endocrinologist to have my levels checked and all the things that you have to do. So I was very fortunate in that way. The company that I work for also has pretty generous leave time, and I was able to like do a lot of flexibility because even once I had the baby, because like I said, she was in the NICU for 2 months. So I went back to work for like part-time from home. And I worked some days from the NICU waiting room so that I could save some of that leave, some of that maternity leave for when she came home. So I was fortunate in that way that I would just have a company that was willing to kind of work with me. We didn't necessarily have a lot of policies that directly dealt with that, but the policies all were very like affirming for same-sex couples, the same as they were for opposite-sex couples.
Yeah, and where I worked at the time, I did not work for NC State at the time, and I wish I had, because the university, being a state agency, has much better policies in place for parental leave and things like that. So it would have been an easier experience for me had I worked where I work now. But at the place I worked before, there was no policy really in place for like second parent leave in any way. So Maggie was born in the middle of the night, Saturday night, Sunday morning. And I think I went back to work on Tuesday or Wednesday of that week. She was in the NICU. She was a rock star in the NICU. We didn't know that at the time. Like it was still very terrifying. 3 or 4 days in, we didn't know how well she was going to do. And I had to go back to work.
And even once she came home, you took vacation.
I had to take my vacation time.
There was no parental like time off.
Yeah. And then I think there was maternity leave. If I had given birth, I would have had some leave, but there was no option for second parent leave in that situation for a newborn, or if we had adopted, there wouldn't have been any leave option available for me at that time.
So our next question, I think, is for Connie. Is the adoption tax credit for all states or just North Carolina?
That's a great question, and I believe it is for all states. It's a federal law, but I don't do taxes, so I don't know that for sure.
All
Sean
right.
and Eric may know.
I don't know.
So-
I believe it's federal. I believe it's for all states.
That's right.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So somebody may have to use the Google to confirm, but we believe it's all states, right? All right. Next question is going back to Becky and Caitlin having to do a psychological evaluation for your donation. Why would they have you do a psychological evaluation?
So anybody, at least at this practice, I don't know if it's a state requirement. I'm not sure what the requirement is, but at the practice we use, anybody who uses donor eggs or donor sperm to conceive has to go through the same evaluation. So
Has to go
it
through
has to go through an evaluation. I'm sure they did not get the same questions that we did. So anyone, straight couple, single parent, anyone who's using a donor egg or donor sperm to conceive has to go through an evaluation. But like Caitlin said, questions like we got, I'm sure, are not standard on the checklist, for asking single parents or straight couples. So the process itself we weren't singled out for being gay to have to go through the process. It applied to anyone who was using donor eggs or donor sperm, but I'm sure there were questions on there that were definitely very specific, just to the gay couples.
Part of that comes from the agencies. They're accustomed to donor egg or donor sperm in a surrogacy context, and they're looking to make sure that whoever is serving as the gestational carrier, the woman serving as the gestational carrier, is going to do what she's agreeing to do, which is give up the baby. And they don't do a very good job of changing things for when it's not that situation. I mean, I've had clients who have had to sign the exact same paperwork that a surrogate would sign.
So there's a question, Connie, about kind of this. How complex is it to have a surrogate mom or a personal friend? Are there contracts?
Absolutely. Everything is discussed. Everything's in a contract. As I said before, 18 years, which is how long a child is a minor, before they become a legal adult, is a really long time for things to change. And so you want to make sure that you've thought of everything and covered everything and everything is discussed so that you're on the same page. And you want to do that. It's not fun, and I get that, but you want to do that on the front end before there's a pregnancy. So in surrogacy, I customarily represent the surrogate or gestational carrier. You'll hear me use both terms. And my goal in representing her is to make sure that she does not end up in any worse position for giving this incredible gift, which is carrying and birthing a child for another couple, a child that she may not, and in fact normally doesn't, have any genetic relationship to and is expected to give up. And so, in trying to make sure that she doesn't end up in any worse off position, thinking through, well, who watches her kids if she's put on bed rest? What happens with her time off work if she travels someplace for the embryo transfer and things like that? What happens if, there's an agreed upon amount that she is paid? People don't do that for free, and nor should they, for pain and suffering and frankly, risk of death. And so, one of the things that I always look at is if there's going to be, there's an attempt, a pregnancy, the pregnancy gets lost, there's a second attempt, a second pregnancy, and then what happens if, how does she get paid? Do the payments start over, or do they pick up where they left off, or things like that? So yes, there's a contract. It's not fun, but it is super, super important.
Sean and Eric, somebody in the audience wants to know if your adoption is completely closed.
Yes.
We closed on February 2nd of this year.
Yeah, it is closed, and the birth parents do not know who we are, where we are, and will not know.
And I think that's something that, you and I talked about separately, was kind of having the birth parents involved versus not having the birth parents involved, and how you kind of come about making that decision. It seems like for y'all, it may have been fairly clear decision. You want to say any more about that?
Yeah, you're right. For us, it was a clear decision because of what happened. Now, if the circumstances were different, and say that you know they lost custody for lesser charges than what they did, and it wasn't because of abuse or neglect, maybe there would be some type of relationship in the future, but not now.
It's all dependent on the situation, I would think. We have another question for Connie. Would you recommend a step parent adoption in the case of a known donor case?
Absolutely. So what that does, so you're talking about it's a married same-sex couple who has used a known donor, and they want to make sure, and he wants to make sure that he has no parental rights and no parental responsibilities. And so, yes, you would do that adoption anyway, just to make sure that both parents have equal parentage rights, but also to cut him off, which is something that he wants and you want. I call them confirmation adoptions because you are already your child's parent, but is a legal confirmation. So being on the birth certificate is not legal parentage. It is an indication of parentage. And so when a married couple has children, if they did not adopt them jointly, then the legal parent, the non-biological parent, will do a confirmation adoption so that that person has full legal parentage. It basically, here's the pedestal with the legal parent, and they join them up on that pedestal.
Great. So what kind of challenges did y'all face in this process?
I think for us, the biggest challenge was not knowing if they were going to be taken back, either to their birth parents or a family member. So 3.5 years of that was a nightmare. But other than that, it was fine. And looking back on it, it was a great experience. And if we had only gotten one child this time, we would go through it again. But we got our max at all at once.
And I think too, coming from a world where, love means so much in our community, having that ability to share that with the kids was so important. And just the feeling that you get with them is amazing. Knowing that, you're the first person they see when they wake up, and that's always going to be a memory they have no matter what.
For us, I think the hardest part, honestly, was the trying to conceive part, and that's really not unique to us as same-sex parents. That's the same for any couple that's trying to get pregnant and not getting pregnant at the first try or the second try or the third try. So that, and just the cost that it entailed, and for us too. I mean, also the medications that I had to be on and the side effects from those medications, and just basically the entirety of a year and a half for us. And we did not try every single month, but regardless, it was pretty much planned around, when our fertility cycles were going to be and what medications I was going to be on, and, that kind of thing. So a year and a half of just literally planning vacations around that.
Yeah. I mean, I think there was more than one time we were visiting family out of town and had to leave early to come back to be back in time for a doctor's appointment. Because everything is, it's planned out to the day, and for us being in Rowan County, there's not a specialist of that caliber here. So our reproductive endocrinologist was in Charlotte. So, you have that constant back and forth. We kept the road hot between here and Charlotte for over a year, back and forth for lab work, and then you go back the next day for a visit. And if you're creeping up on the end of that cycle and you're ready for insemination, then it's days in a row. Because if you go one day and they check your blood work, and then they say, "Oh, not quite ready. We'll try tomorrow." Then you have to go back the next day, and so you run into those endless trips back and forth. But again, that's not singular to us as a same-sex couple. That's anyone who has to see a reproductive endocrinologist or get other fertility assistance. Those obstacles are the same for any couple that's in that position, or any person, anybody that's trying to conceive in that way has to go through that same process.
Connie, what are some of the biggest challenges you see people struggling with through this process?
I mean, some of it is just really straightforward, like, getting a birth certificate that says father when you're both mothers and things like that. The other part of it is it's a process, like the adoption, the confirmation adoption is a process, and it's not a perfect fit. Waiting when you're adopting through DSS, you all haven't spoken to this, but you kind of alluded to the law requires that the birth parents be given a chance to get their act together. And as Sean and Eric said, at any point, the court can take the kids and put them back with their birth parents or a relative. And I mean, I can't imagine living through that. And thank you all for being such great dads and sticking through it. It's very, I really can't imagine. It's very hard. The other thing is that, there's just lots of options, and as you all have been, you're trailblazers. And, I think of that term very literally, and I think that you all can speak to, you already have some things that happen when you're a trailblazer, very literally. Sometimes it's smooth going, and sometimes you are literally climbing over, digging under, or forcing your way through some rough stuff. On that, the law is catching up. It's not there yet. I will tell you that I'm a member of kind of an ad hoc attorney committee. We call ourselves the Modern Family Committee, not just same-sex couples, but grandparents and three parent families and all of that, recognizing all of that. We've kind of got some legislation teed up. But we need to elect some good people here in North Carolina that will let us pass that legislation. Other states, not many, but a couple are having 3-parent families that are doing adoptions. We're not there yet, but certainly, people register to vote and vote for good people so that we can have our families completely recognized. So we don't have to go through doing an adoption of your own child, which is just ridiculous. But it's the law just hasn't caught up. I mean, marriage equality, we're now coming into 6 years of it, and so it's got some catch up time.
So if you had to do this all again, would you do it again, or would you do it a different way?
I mean, no question.
Yeah.
I think I would even do it sooner.
Huh, do it sooner.
Yeah. If we would have known it went the way it did, we would have started years ago. But
it wouldn't have gone that way at that point in time.
Well, we wouldn't have the same kids, but that fear of how are they going to treat us? Are they even going to let us be foster parents or adopt? And that was the biggest thing. Will they let us? And it was funny, by the end of our classes, all the social workers were fighting over which one was going to be ours because we were the first. And so we know that there have been others since we went through there, and that's exciting. And I encourage anyone, please, if you're interested, check out DSS. There are over 400,000 kids in foster care that need homes.
And whether you get to love them, for that 18 years, or you get to love them for 1 year, give them that love. I mean, they deserve it. You deserve it.
Sure.
So Becky and Caitlin, would you do it again? Go a different route?
We absolutely would do it again. I mean, I don't know that we would do very much differently. I will say though, like we looked into like what it would take to have a child, and the legal challenges that we may face, even like with me carrying, and the fact that marriage equality happened in 2014 significantly changed like the ease of like our ability to just kind of have her listed on the birth certificate from the start, those kinds of things, because we knew like prior to that it would have been much more difficult.
So Connie, would you pick a different area of law, or do you like doing this?
Oh, I love doing it. I love doing it. Yeah, it's amazing. Being able to call somebody and tell them that their adoption is done is one of the most amazing phone calls I ever get to make. Yeah, all day, every day.
Excellent. Let's see. All right. So Salisbury Pride is looking for ways to become more family friendly. So if you have ideas, you can send them to Salisbury Pride on our Facebook page. We're talking about having a kids zone at our next Salisbury Pride Festival. So if you'd like to volunteer, be a part of that, let us know. We want our festivals to be family friendly and fun for all. So if you have ideas, share them. If somebody is interested in getting this process started to start building a family, where should they start? What should they read? Where should they go? How do you get started?
So if you want to go with the route we did, you just contact your local DSS office. It's easiest to go on their website. They have all the information, so you can register for the classes. That's the first part.
And they also offer what they call an inquiry class, which it's literally like an hour out of your evening. And it gives you the background, what it entails, what you're going to be going through. And I think that was the night that we decided like immediately that that's what was for us and that's what we were going to do. And we knew that minute. And ironically, the girl that taught our inquiry class ended up being our social worker as well. She won the fight. She won the battle. So I'm not surprised. She's tough as nails. So.
All right. If somebody wants to go the sperm donor or the surrogacy route or any of the other routes, do y'all have advice of how they should get started?
I mean, our first step was really going to see the reproductive endocrinologist. They also offered like info sessions that you could go to. I think they're actually offering them online right now. So you can get information that way. But just, anytime you're trying to get pregnant, you should see your doctor first. So, that's always the first step, I think. But, if people, for us specifically, if people have questions about like, the process or where we went or anything like that, we're always open to sharing that.
And I would say talk to a knowledgeable attorney fairly early on in the process. Things may not legally may be different than what you think they are, and they're different state to state. So be careful what you're reading on Google. What is true in North Carolina may not be what's going on other places or vice versa. So speaking to an attorney and speaking to people who have been through this before, I think would be a great place to start.
Great. Thank you all. So does anybody have any final comments or statements they would like to make before we wrap up?
Thank you for doing this.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for being a part of this panel this evening. Again, we want to mention that our virtual events for Salisbury Pride are sponsored by Food Line. So we thank Food Line for their support for Salisbury Pride over the years. And if you ever have any questions for Salisbury Pride, you can reach out to us on Facebook. But we appreciate all the audience participation and our panelists, and we hope you'll join us for the next one. Thank you.